Hey, HorseCenter fans, Matt and I are back with another edition of Breeders' Cup HorseCenter. Matt, what are we talking about today?
It's time for us to start thinking about horses that we like and don't like in the Breeders' Cup. So let's do it contender, pretender style.
Well, I hope our picks are more, I hope we're contenders, not pretenders. Folks, we're going to talk about some horses that may offer value or may offer less than good value in the Breeders' Cup. Contenders, Pretenders, Breeders' Cup 2018. Watch it now right here on HorseCenter. Welcome to another edition of HorseCenter, everyone. I am Brian Zipsy, and as always, I have the fantastic pleasure of being joined by my co-host to the East Coast. That's Matt Shipman. How are you today, Matt?
I'm good, Brian. Is it really possible that the Breeders' Cup is just like 3 weeks away?
24 days, my friend. We'll be talking 2-year-olds at Churchill Downs for a big day of juvenile racing, Breeders' Cup Friday, and then, of course, Saturday, the big one. 24 days until it all starts. Breeders' Cup is almost upon us, folks. And today, Matt and I are going to go over some horses of interest for many of the Breeders' Cup races. And we're going to say whether they're a contender or a pretender. Are you ready for this, Matt?
I'm ready, Brian.
Let's jump right in, Matt. We're not sure what race he's going in. He still may be in the sprint, the dirt mile, the Breeders' Cup Classic. Let's talk about Mind Your Biscuits as a Breeders' Cup Classic contender or pretender, Matt. Start us off.
Well, Mind Your Biscuits is so intriguing, and we spent a little bit of time talking about him last week. But I'm going to put Mind Your Biscuits. He's both to me. He's a contender and he's a pretender. Let's talk about the Classic for a minute, Brian. I said last week that my feeling is that Mind Your Biscuits is going to go in the Classic. If he goes in the Classic, I think I got to call him a pretender in the Classic. Sometimes I don't like that pretender thing. That's not meant to be offensive in any way. I just think that that's going to be a really tough spot for him in the Classic, the 1.25 miles, etc. So Mind Your Biscuits, if he's in the Classic, pretender. But if Mind Your Biscuits goes in the dirt mile, he's a big-time contender. He's the likely winner in there. So, folks, I guess you know where I'd like to see Biscuits run.
All right, Matt. Well, that was politically correct. And you jumped the gun because we're not even talking about the dirt mile yet, but that's okay, Matt. You are the best co-host a guy could have, so I'll let you jump the gun a little bit. Hey, Matt, down here in Kentucky, we throw a slab of fried chicken in between our biscuits. I don't think he's going to be a chicken. I don't think he's going to go to the dirt mile. I think he's going to the Classic myself. That's my inkling, at least. Mind Your Biscuits in the Breeders' Cup Classic. Now, contender, pretender in the Classic this year, Matt, I think that's a difficult tightrope we walk here, but I'm going to put Mind Your Biscuits in the contender list. I've said before he will not be my top pick in the Breeders' Cup Classic, but his Lucas Classic over the track here at Churchill Downs, and I think that's important, Matt. Churchill Downs is a track that not every horse loves. Mind Your Biscuits, he's been stabled here for a while. In the Lucas Classic, we found out he liked the track, and I'll tell you what's interesting about Mind Your Biscuits. He's a rallier. He's a confirmed rallier. All his races, he comes off the pace. Of course, at 6 furlongs, 7 furlongs, it's from way off the pace. At 1.8 miles in the Lucas Classic, he made a nice move on the turn. Sure, it was against Lesser, but I see him doing that in the Classic a little bit, laying behind the speed and maybe getting first run at the leaders, and that could be a decisive move for a really, really good horse who obviously likes this track. He's a contender, Matt. Let's move to the Bob Baffert runners in the Breeders' Cup Classic, because I think a lot of people are interested to know what we think about Mackenzie and West Coast. Let's start with Mackenzie.
Brian, I was very impressed, and I was dubious going into the Pennsylvania Derby. I thought it was a really tall task after 6 months off on that Parks racing surface, which can be quirky and can be really slow, and it was really slow on that day in September for this year's Pennsylvania Derby. So I was dubious, and what I saw from Mackenzie in there really impressed me. I know people just assume that Baffert is great at getting horses ready off the layoff, but it doesn't always work for him. But it sure did work on Pennsylvania Derby Day. I loved what I saw from Mackenzie in the Pennsylvania Derby. For me, he's a big contender in the Classic.
Contender for you. So we were different on Mind Your Biscuits, but on Mackenzie, we're going to be different again, Matt. Mackenzie, I'm walking that tightrope. It's tough to say contender and pretender in this Classic, but he will not be on my tickets, Matt. He's a horse who Baffert said he can have ready first time, and he did. He was ready to roll in the Pennsylvania Derby, but this isn't Axelrod and King Zachary, my friend. This is the Breeders' Cup Classic. He's never run against older horses. He's never been 10 furlongs. There's a host of speed in here, Matt. He's moving up too much after that long layoff, after one win in the Pennsylvania Derby. Plus, here's another reason he's on my personal pretender list, Matt. He's going to get bet. Did you see how he got bet in the future wager? Mackenzie was one of the favorites. I don't think he deserves that kind of action against all these good older horses in the Breeders' Cup Classic. Little bit too much too soon. I've been burned by Baffert before, Matt, but I'm laying off Mackenzie pretender. Let's stick with Baffert, though. Let's talk West Coast.
Okay, Brian, and this is probably going to surprise most of the folks, but West Coast for me is a pretender. I could say what Brian said about Mackenzie at the end in terms of the odds and such. I don't want any part of the odds that are going to be on West Coast. I have to go back to the fact that as much as he's run in all of the grade ones, in all of the big races recently, I just don't like what I saw in all of those races. I don't like what I saw in the Dubai World Cup. I didn't like what I saw in the Classic last year when he ran third, but it was really a non-threatening third. It's been a long time back to the Pennsylvania Derby back in 2017 that West Coast has won a race. So for me, and the fact that it's Baffert, and the fact that the price is probably going to be low, West Coast is a pretender. I will not be betting him.
Well, let's talk price first, because I don't know. I know who should be bet more in the Breeders' Cup Classic between the Baffert pair and it's West Coast. But I'm not sure that Mackenzie's going to be bet more. Matt, we're 3 for 3. We disagree on all three of these. So it becomes a matter of our viewers, I guess. Who do they like? Whose opinion on this do they like more, yours or mine? I think West Coast is a contender, Matt. While Mackenzie was a little bit more ready, amped up, the type of horse that shines first start out, West Coast, Baffert said, and I believe it, he was a horse that needs to move up. We saw this a little last year. He needs a little bit of racing. I liked his prep a lot. He was there at the 8th pole against Accelerate, who's been, obviously, in California, he's been the best horse going in America this year. So I like the prep a lot. I have no problem with his Dubai World Cup. He was the best of the rest. Thunder Snow's huge performance on the lead there. And then the Breeders' Cup Classic. Listen, last year, he was a 3-year-old. He's going to be a little bit better at 4. Matt, we know that. Horses get better with age. And he was third behind Gun Runner. There's no Gun Runner in here. So a little bit easier Classic, a little bit of maturity, one good prep to get him ready. I like his experience at 10 furlongs. While Mackenzie has no experience at 10 furlongs, West Coast has plenty of solid experience, including a very nice win in last year's Travers Stakes at the tiring racetrack at Saratoga. So for me, West Coast of the Baffert pair is a contender. All right, Matt, I like all this disagreement. It's fun to disagree with you. All right, we're gonna stick with these older males, Matt, if you will, and let's dive down into the dirt mile, a one-turn mile at the Churchill Downs, coming out of the chute. And again, you wanted to identify Mind Your Biscuits as a horse who we should talk about in both races. I think you already alluded to what you think about him in the dirt mile.
Yes, exactly. I think if Mind Your Biscuits goes to the dirt mile, he's going to be very, very hard to beat. And I've kind of had this position in past years with other horses where there's been controversy. Should they go in the Classic? Should they go in the Dirt Mile? I don't know. My feeling is go to the Dirt Mile and get yourself a Breeders' Cup win, and that's why I put Mind Your Biscuits as a big contender in the Dirt Mile.
Yeah, well, I can't disagree with you on this one. Mind Your Biscuits, if he goes Dirt Mile, like I said, I have a feeling they're going to go Classic with him, but if he goes Dirt Mile, he may well be the favorite. I know people are talking about the undefeated Catalina Cruiser as a possible favorite, but if we find out the news that Mind Your Biscuits is Dirt Mile bound, I think he might be the favorite. It's one or the other. Those are the two favorites. They're both contenders. Of the two, I like Mind Your Biscuits better. So yeah, he's a contender in the Dirt Mile. This is a no-brainer. What about City of Light, though? I just said that the two clear favorites in the Dirt Mile are going to be Catalina Cruiser and Mind Your Biscuits. I think City of Light is an interesting horse here and maybe a slightly forgotten horse in the Dirt Mile.
Yeah, City of Light for trainer Michael McCarthy, up-and-coming name on the national scene, based out in California. City of Light, Brian, what a terrific record on that horse, huh? 9 career starts, 4 wins, 4 seconds, 1/3. Horse has never run a bad race. I think selecting a race in the Breeders' Cup for that horse, the Dirt Mile, fits that horse perfectly, especially if Mind Your Biscuits is in there. I guess I've got to consider City of Light a contender. Odds will probably be decent.
Right, Matt. Odds will be decent. And I'll tell you what, City of Light is one of the horses I'm excited to bet in the Breeders' Cup. In the Dirt Mile, you said it. I think this is the absolute perfect spot for this horse. He's proven sprinting. He's proven going long now. Don't forget, folks, this is the horse that out-dueled Accelerate to the wire in the 9-furlong Oaklawn Handicap. He's never run a bad race, as you said, Matt. His worst race was 3rd at 1.25 miles. This ain't 1.25 miles. This is a 1-turn mile. He's got speed. He's got tactical ability. He's obviously got class because he's done it both sprinting and running 2 turns. He had a layoff after getting a good foundation of distance racing this spring. And I really liked his prep. He went wide in the forego, finished 2nd in between Whitmore and Limousine Liberal. We know how good those horses are at 7 furlongs. Now he gets just a little bit of time between that nice comeback race and the Dirt Mile. I tell you what, whether Mind Your Biscuits is in the race or not, he might be my top pick in the Dirt Mile. City of Light, big contender in the Dirt Mile. Okay, Matt, we're dropping back in distance. We did the Classic at 1.25 miles. We did the Dirt Mile at 1 mile. How about we jump into the sprint? And I said the Breeders' Cup Classic was a contentious race, Matt. Certainly, this year's Breeders' Cup Sprint is setting up as a contentious affair. The fur will fly early, my friend. They're going to run crazy fractions in this 6-furlong race at Churchill Downs. And one of the horses that's going to carve out those fractions is XY Jet. We haven't seen a lot from XY Jet over recent years, Matt. In fact, he hasn't lost a race in America in about 2 years. What do you think about him in the Breeders' Cup Sprint?
I think he's the XY factor in the Breeders' Cup Sprint. Seriously, Brian, I have a long list of doubts about XY Jet. The first one is whether or not he's even going to be in the race. He hasn't run since June 30th. He had to skip a recent start with some type of problem. So there's that question. Brian, this is a horse that races in Florida. This is a horse that wins races in Florida. This is a horse that's only won 1 race in his career outside of Florida, and that was in an allowance race at Monmouth Park. But on the other hand, speed is dangerous, and XY Jet will be the speed of the speed. Almost took the Golden Shaheen in Dubai running that way. That was when Mind Your Biscuits made that remarkable closing move to nip that horse at the wire. But this is some tough field, as you alluded to, Brian, and I just don't think XY Jet has a shot in here. Pretender.
Well, Matt, what they've been saying lately is he will run in the Breeders' Cup Sprint. Of course, that's if everything stays healthy over the next 3 weeks. And I think he adds an element to the Breeders' Cup Sprint. I'm happy he's in the race. I think he gets a little bit of play because of his marvelous record. And you look at the form, especially recently, it's really outstanding. That race in Dubai was pretty huge, Matt, because he outran some fast horses early. Roy H. could never get him, and finally Mind Your Biscuits with a late rush stole the win away from him late. But that was a huge race in Dubai. And speaking of traveling away from Florida, that's away from Florida. Now, having said all that, I agree with you. I think he's a pretender too. Churchill Downs is a tough track to beat a lot of other speed, and especially for a horse who doesn't have great experience here at Churchill Downs. XY Jet with all this speed, I'm going to be happy that he carves out a 43 because I want to bet some ralliers in this Breeders' Cup Sprint, and XY Jet's going to do that. I think he'll be pressured early and often though, and I just can't, like you, I can't see him sticking around. Pretender, XY Jet in the sprint. Let's talk about another horse in the sprint, Matt. And this one we're kind of assuming the sprint. Ben Colebrook's horse, Limousine Liberal. Of course, he's been a nice Kentucky horse and I guess a national horse for a few years now. And Limousine Liberal's coming off a couple of losses recently, Matt. They're talking maybe the dirt mile is a thought, but I expect to see him in the sprint. What do you think about Limousine Liberal in the Breeders' Cup Sprint?
Well, Limousine Liberal is a Churchill Downs loving kind of horse, Brian. 8 career starts, 6 wins, 1 second at Churchill Downs. That's a home track advantage, if you ask me, Brian. But on the other hand, trainer Ben Colebrook, I saw him getting interviewed the other day, and he said that 7 furlongs is really the best distance of Limousine Liberal. And this is one really, really tough field here. I like the horse, gutsy horse, always right there. Finished a troubled third in the Phoenix the other day. He was outside and with nowhere to go. Then he was inside with nowhere to go. But always in there competing. You got to respect Limousine Liberal, but going to get a big price, but a really, really tough spot. I got to say Pretender. I'm
sorry, did you say Pretender?
Yes, I did.
Okay, good. We're going to disagree again. He's a contender. He's a horse who I think has a big shot. Hey, if it rains, I don't want it to rain, but if it rains and this track comes up muddy or sloppy, Limousine Liberal becomes one of my best bets of the whole Breeders' Cup weekend. He moves up on a wet track. He's going to love the combination of Churchill Downs and slop if he gets it in the Breeders' Cup. But on a fast track, Matt, he's still a contender. I tell you what, those last 2 races, I think he could have won both for sure. I mean, the Forego, he went so wide. Whitmore saved so much ground on him in the Forego, and Limousine Liberal was still right in the picture there with City of Light, not far behind Whitmore in the 7 furlong Forego. But in the 6 furlong race at Keeneland the other day, I was there in person, Matt. I tell you what, Promises Fulfilled is really, really good. Again, Whitmore got a better trip than Limousine Liberal. Limousine Liberal took the worst of it and was still right there with a chance at the 6 furlongs. Another thing, Matt, we already talked about him loving Churchill Downs, but I think he's going to love all his speed. I've been talking about a 43 half mile in the Breeders' Cup Sprint. That sets things up for horses to come from back of the pack. So, yeah, maybe 7 furlongs, he's even better than he is at 6 furlongs. But with all that speed, 6 furlongs is right in his wheelhouse, Matt. Limousine Liberal, give me 15-1. Give me 18-1. Give me 20-1, Matt. He's a contender. All right, let's do one more horse on the male side of things here, Mr. Schiffman, for the Breeders' Cup. I've heard a lot of talk lately about Channel Maker in the Breeders' Cup Turf. Maybe we're looking for an American horse to do big things, or a North American horse to do big things in the Breeders' Cup Turf. But Channel Maker seems to be the hot horse after his Turf Classic romp. What say you, sir?
I say you are right about Channel Maker being the hot horse. Hall of Fame trainer Bill Mott has Channel Maker in the best form that he's ever been in his career, and he is having an absolutely fantastic 2018 with his win in the Turf Classic was just huge, just ran away from that field. He was also won the Bowling Green at Saratoga. He was second in the Sword Dancer. Mott says he just keeps getting better and better. Going to head out to the Breeders' Cup and take a shot. However, Brian, we're talking about the Breeders' Cup turf, and there's going to be Europeans in there, and the class of American males this year is just not the strongest that we've had in other years. There's no main sequence in here or horses like that have won the turf. Lots of respect for Mott, lots of respect for Channel Maker. The price is going to be there, but against the Euros, I just don't see it. I got to call him a pretender.
Channel Maker in the Breeders' Cup turf, Matt. A lot of talk, a lot of buzz, but for me, he's a pretender as well. Channel Maker, he's had a lot of chances over the last couple years against good horses. He finally exploded in the Turf Classic, his most recent race, his last race before the Breeders' Cup, and all of a sudden he's the hot horse in a division that was lacking a hot horse. But for a lot of reasons, I don't love him in here. I will say one thing, one caveat. Channel Maker likes a turf course with a lot of cut in it. If we do get that rain, if we do get a yielding, soft turf course, he moves closer to a pretender. But unfortunately, I don't know that gives him much of an advantage over some of the good Euros coming over. Can you imagine a Naval right behind Channel Maker for the first 6 furlongs? What's going to happen to Channel Maker's chances? Oh, I don't know, 3-4 furlongs out of the race. I just don't see it happening. Channel Maker, I think he got an easy pace in the Turf Classic. I think he was the horse that loved that wet turf on Turf Classic day. Come to Churchill Downs, face a strong influx of European invaders. Not for me, Channel Maker. Let them bet Channel Maker off that Turf Classic all they want. I don't see him doing it in the Breeders' Cup turf. All right, Matt, those were some of the males we're interested in seeing, whether they're good bets or bad bets, whether they're contenders or pretenders for the Breeders' Cup. But what about the Distaff set? What about the female horses? Let's start with the Distaff. Wow, that Beldame was pretty good for the Cat, Matt. Wow, Cat. But is she a contender or a pretender when she comes to the Breeders' Cup Distaff?
It was a wow victory for Wildcat. Chad Brown. But, Brian, let's face it, that was not a very strong Beldame field at all in there, Brian. I know Chad Brown is formidable in the Breeders' Cup, and there probably is no other trainer that's done as well in the Breeders' Cup over the last 2 or 3 years than Chad Brown. But I think Wildcat caught a really, really easy spot there. Yes, the former Chilean runner who won 8 races in South America has that nice part in her resume. But this is the Distaff, and it's going to be a good field. And I got to give Wildcat a pretender.
All right, Matt. Chad Brown tends to rationalize horses when they don't perform quite up to par for him. Wildcat was 0 for 2 in America after, I can't emphasize enough how good she was in Chile. I mean, she was running different distances. She was beating the male. She was winning the biggest races in Chile. She was better than Robert Bruce in Chile, Matt. Wildcat was a serious South American import. Saratoga, she just missed the first time. She was a well-beaten third behind Abel Tasman in a late next time in the Personal Ensign. But then she came to Belmont. She got a different track, and that's what Brown says she needed, a different track. And she needed a little bit more acclimation to America. I almost tend to believe him this time because I think she really did move forward after what I thought was a pretty promising debut performance. So Abel Tasman didn't run well last time. Elate is out. I thought those were the two horses to beat in the Distaff. Wildcat ran a very big beldame. I know she's got back class. I'm thinking that there's a lot of opportunity all of a sudden in the Distaff with the 3-year-olds really not proving, at least to me, that they can necessarily beat the older horses or should be heavily favored to beat the older horses. Monomoy Girl's a deserving favorite, but I want to see her against older before, and I didn't think her last race was her best race. So for that reason, and the way Wildcat popped in the beldame, I'm going to say Contender. Hey, Matt, how about we stick with the same race? And we know Monomoy Girl's a contender, but what about her rival? She's finished ahead of Midnight Bassoux 3 times, although last time there was question whether she would have if she didn't bother her in the cotillion. In fact, she was taken down. Midnight Bassoux was the adjudged winner of the cotillion. Is Midnight Bassoux, after 3 losses to Midnight, or after finishing behind Monomoy Girl 3 times, is she all of a sudden a real contender for the Breeders' Cup Distaff?
All of a sudden, I like the way you threw that in there, Brian. Let's remember a couple of things here. That Midnight Bassoux ran 3rd in the Kentucky Oaks, which I guess is an indication that she was fairly comfortable on the Churchill Downs racetrack. So that's a plus in there. I'm trying to avoid thinking about the cotillion because I still have a bad taste in my mouth about the outcome of the cotillion in there, with Midnight Bassoux getting put up in there that I still don't think was deserved. But anyway, the Breeders' Cup Distaff goes back to 1 1/8, and I don't think that is in the plus column for Midnight Bassoux. You were talking about the 3-year-olds and how they fit in here against the older. I certainly have to feel that way about Midnight Bassoux. I'm going to need to see something from her against the older that we haven't seen before, and it's 1 1/8. I'm saying Pretender.
Yeah, this is another tough one for me, Matt. Midnight Bassoux, I thought, ran a very good race in the cotillion. She cut back from 1 1/4 miles, which I think we are pretty much in agreement that she didn't really want in the Alabama. And 1 1/16 miles was in her wheelhouse in the cotillion. I think she wins the cotillion with a clean shred. I'm not sure about that because it's Monomoy Girl we're talking about, but I think she wins the cotillion with a clean shred. Now she goes an extra 16th. I agree with you. I don't think that the 1 1/8 miles is quite as optimal for her as 1 1/16 miles Distaff would be. But it doesn't matter. The Distaff is 9 furlongs. That's what they're going to run. I'm going to get back to, I have questions about Abel Tasman. Believe it or not, I have some questions about Monomoy Girl. I wonder if her last 2 races weren't quite as good as some of her earlier races. Monomoy Girl's back at Churchill Downs. Abel Tasman certainly could pop up. But I see Midnight Bassoux getting a good trip in here. I think Mike Smith has learned that he wants to be not real far back in here, kind of make a middle move on Midnight Bassoux. And if she makes her move, makes that sharp move, I could see her winning the Distaff. I think the Distaff is a lot wider open of a race than I thought a while ago. I was an Elate guy. I thought Elate would be tough in this race. She's out, just like Wildcat. Midnight Bassoux, I think she's got a shot in here. So for that reason, she is a contender. All right, Matt, those are some of the older, or at least the 3-year-olds and up running in the Distaff. Let's jump back down to some younger fillies, if you will. How about Serengeti Empress? Are we to take seriously what she's been doing against probably a little lesser competition, both at Ellis Park, but then at Churchill Downs as well? Those margins of victory are crazy, Matt, but there's some good fillies all of a sudden coming in that she'll face in the Breeders' Cup Juvenile Fillies.
Yeah, that last statement that you made is what made me put Serengeti Empress on the list here, is that with some new fillies appearing, like Jaywalk, with her impressive win in the Frizette just this past weekend, in a time that was actually faster than the time that the boys ran in the Champagne, that Complexity ran, and he was impressive in there. You got Bellafina out in the West Coast representing the California horses. I just have a feeling that Serengeti Express is going to be a little bit overlooked when you talk about these new stars that have come in there. You're not going to get a big price on this horse, but I think you're going to get a better price on the horse than you would have gotten just a few weeks ago. And let's face it, Brian, a 19-length win at Churchill Downs, that's a feather in her cap. We know she's fast, and we know that she can carry that speed. I think Serengeti Empress is definitely a contender in there, especially if you could get 4-1, maybe 5-1 in that race.
Matt, I don't know what you're smoking out there in New Jersey, but it's got to be some good stuff, because you're not getting 5-1 on Serengeti Empress in the Breeders' Cup Juvenile Fillies. Having said that, I like a lot of what you said, because I think Bellafina has to get that. She's won 3 straight graded stakes in California. And Jaywalk all of a sudden is a legitimate contender coming off that first win. And Restless Rider has won at Churchill nicely and is coming off the Keeneland win. There are other horses to bet. Still, you win 2 races by 30 lengths, and the last one was over the track in a graded stakes in the Pocahontas. I just can't see her at least not vying for favoritism. I still think she's the favorite, a slight favorite over Bellafina. Maybe she's the second choice, but I think she's got to get that in here. And I have nothing bad to say about her. Things are going to get tougher. She's going to get a test, and she really hasn't passed a serious test in other words, a fight, a battle. So it'll be interesting to see. But right now, if I had to pick one horse to win the Breeders' Cup Juvenile Fillies, I'm thinking more 5-2, 3-1. But in that range, I think it would be Serengeti Empress. So for me, yeah, she's a contender. Another one, Matt, that I think that you picked out will be one of the favorites, but probably not favorite. You wanted to bring up Sister Charlie in the Breeders' Cup Filly in Mare Turf. She seems to me like the top American female turf horse of the year.
I think she's the top American turf horse, period, Brian. And she's going to run against the fillies and mares in here. Her record in the U.S. is just phenomenal. Her only loss coming to her stablemate 4-Star Crook, who just won again this past weekend. But not only is Sister Charlie really good in America, but before she came over to the barn of Chad Brown in Europe, she was running really well, and she was beating Group 1, Group 2 horses over there. So this is no Euro that was, just kind of marginal over there, finding easier going here in the U.S. Sister Charlie fits in with whoever the Euros are sending over, assuming that Enable is going to go, if she comes over, is going to run against the boys. Definite contender.
Absolutely. Sister Charlie's an obvious contender here. I don't have her far, though, ahead of the New York bred, because 4-Star Crook just keeps running big races. Sister Charlie's gotten the better of her, I guess, 2 out of 3 this year. But 4-Star Crook, I think 4-Star Crook will have better odds than Sister Charlie. And at the odds, maybe 4-Star Crook becomes even a better bet for me. But I think the Americans in this one, not the male turf, but the filly and mare turf, I think the Americans stack up pretty well. We're not going to see Enable in the filly and mare turf. If she comes, she's going against in the bigger one, the turf. We're not going to see Sea of Class. She's not going to run over here in the Breeders' Cup. So that leaves still some really big names coming from Europe, but I don't think horses that Sister Charlie can't compete with or 4-Star Crook can't compete with over here. I assume Wild Illusion, who's won a couple Group 1 races in a row over there, really good 3-year-old fillies coming over, and I'm guessing she will be favored. I don't see Sister Charlie getting bet more than her because of her good European form. Lawrence, I'm not sure if she'll go a mile 3/8 over here, so probably not, but there'll be some more good Europeans. So Sister Charlie will have reasonable odds, but I think the key, what we're saying here, Matt, and we're agreeing, is that the best Americans have a real shot in this race. Sister Charlie is a contender. Hey, Matt, one more. You wanted to bring up another one, and it is the Juvenile Fillies turf. Chad Brown has a horse who's 2 for 2 that you wanted to talk about a little bit.
Yeah, and we were just talking about an American being able to hold their own against the Europeans. Let me tell you what, Newspaper of Record is another one of those Americans runners that's going to be able to hold her own against any Europeans that come over. As a matter of fact, Newspaper of Record is actually an Irish-bred horse who has been over here and in the barn of Chad Brown throughout her career. Chad won this race, remember, back with Lady Eli. Am I saying that Newspaper of Record is Lady Eli-esque? Maybe. This is a fast horse. This is a horse that's fast out of the gate, can carry her speed, and then show some turn of foot down the stretch also. Gonna be very tough for the Europeans to beat.
Yeah, no, I'm not going to disagree with you on this one, Matt. I think you're on the favorite here. I think her races in New York are so impressive looking that she will be the favorite in the Breeders' Cup Juvenile Fillies turf. There are a few things that I'd like to question, and you know me, I like to try to beat the favorites in here. So I'm going to mention them at least because both of her wins, she's only run twice. They were both easy wins in New York. Both of them came on yielding turf, and you mentioned she's an Irish bred. It makes sense that she would like a wetter turf. She's out of an outstanding young sire named Lopa de Vega, and I think middle distances with a turf with some give in it make a ton of sense for her. If she comes over here on a firm turf, do I want her at 8-5? Probably not. Probably I'll try to beat her. She could be any kind. The answer to your question, is she Lady Eli-esque? Absolutely. After 2 starts, there's nothing not to like about her. I mean, they were fantastic first 2 races for her. But if we're talking about excited to bet at the odds, I think the Euros that come over, or maybe even some Americans, all of a sudden get a firm turf and have a shot to beat her. Having said that, what we're doing today, Contender Pretender, yes, Newspaper of Record for Chad Brown is a contender. All right, Matt, that's our Contender Pretender show for the Breeders' Cup here, folks. I hope you enjoyed it. We're moving to the Breeders' Cup in tremendous, what's the word I'm looking for? Like a tremendous machine, Matt Schiffman? Something like that, in tremendous style as we get ever closer to the World Championships at Churchill Downs. I want to thank our sponsor, Derby Wars, the best contest site out there. And if you haven't, folks, done it before, now is the time to subscribe to our YouTube channel right here at Horse Racing Nation. Matt, we're on a holding pattern with Derby Day Racing as our horses are getting some time off at the farm. They'll be back in training soon, though. Let's get a parting shot from you, my friend.
Folks, I want to remind you, the show's going to be coming out on Tuesdays up through the Breeders' Cup and probably a week or so after the Breeders' Cup. This show with the Pretenders and Contenders, this is Brian and I getting you guys thinking about horses that we like, horses that you should think about, and ways that you can be thinking about your Breeders' Cup picks early on. And of course, I want to thank Brett Workman for putting together the show, and I want to wish Brett good luck in the Ironman Triathlon in Louisville. That's the big one, the real deal Ironman, not one of those minis. Brett Workman, he's the man.
Hey, the Iron Man, what a guy. And he's put in the work, Matt. So hopefully he does really, really well on Sunday here in Louisville. The Iron Man, Brett Workman. And yeah, the Contenders Pretenders, it was a little fun for us to have some fun with this, but hopefully we talk about, we get you thinking about value. Whose value, who's going to have some odds that maybe it's a lot higher than they should be, or maybe some that are just too low for their chances to win. Anyway, that's our Breeders' Cup show. We'll see you, as Matt said, right here Tuesday next week on HorseCenter.